In May 1998, Chicago Tribune reporter Sarah Chen received a mysterious tip about Michael Jordan's gambling debts. Armed with photos and documents that could destroy the basketball legend's career, she confronted him at 6 a.m. in an empty United Center. Jordan looked at the evidence that seemed to prove he owed $2.3 million to dangerous people. Then he said something that changed everything Sarah thought she knew about the story. "Before you destroy my life," Jordan said quietly, "let me ask you something. What do you know about my father?" Those words began an investigation that would expose one of the largest criminal conspiracies in American history, save dozens of children from human trafficking, and reveal a truth so personal and shocking that it would reunite a family torn apart by 26 years of lies and fear. This is the story of how a reporter's attempt to cancel Michael Jordan led to the most important discovery of her life and changed everything she believed about truth, family, and the price of seeking justice. What Jordan told Sarah that morning would stun not just her, but everyone who heard it. Because sometimes the most devastating accusations lead to the most incredible revelations. The phone rang at exactly 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in May 1998. Sarah Chen was sitting at her tiny kitchen table in her Lincoln Park apartment, eating cold Chinese takeout and staring at her laptop screen. The cursor blinked at her like a heartbeat, waiting for words that wouldn't come. "Sarah Chen, Chicago Tribune," she answered, balancing the phone between her ear and shoulder. "You the sports reporter?" The voice was rough, like sandpaper on wood. "One of them, yes." Sarah pushed her glasses up her nose. She was tired of explaining that she mostly covered high school basketball games while the men got the real stories. "I got something big for you. Something about Michael Jordan." Sarah sat up straighter. Everyone in Chicago had something to say about Michael Jordan. He was like the city's heartbeat, especially now with the Bulls heading into the NBA Finals. But most tips were garbage, jealous ex-girlfriends or people looking for attention. "What kind of something?" Sarah asked. "The kind that could end his career." The line went quiet, except for the sound of traffic in the background. Sarah grabbed a pen and pulled over a napkin to write on. "I'm listening," she said. "Not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow at Millennium Park, by the fountain. 2 o'clock. Come alone." "Wait, who is this? What's your name?" "Call me Vinny." "And lady?" "Bring a camera. You're gonna want pictures of what I show you." The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone for a long moment. Outside her window, Chicago's skyline glittered like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there, Michael Jordan was probably sleeping peacefully in his mansion, getting ready for another day of being the most famous athlete in the world. She looked around her apartment, the peeling paint on the walls, the second-hand furniture, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. 3 years out of Northwestern University, and she was still struggling to make rent. Her parents had sacrificed everything to send her to college, working 18-hour days at their restaurant in Chinatown. Her mother's hands were permanently stained from washing dishes, and her father's back was bent from years of carrying heavy trays. "Maybe you should have studied accounting," her mother had said just last week when Sarah called asking to borrow money for groceries. Numbers don't lie like people do. But Sarah loved stories. She loved digging for truth, finding the real story behind the headlines. The problem was, nobody seemed to want her to find those stories. Her editor, Frank Morrison, kept giving her high school games and community league coverage while sending the men to interview the Bulls and the Bears. "Build your reputation first," Frank always said. "Pay your dues." How long did paying dues take? Sarah was 28 years old. Some of her college friends were already making partner at law firms or running their own businesses. She was still trying to prove herself worthy of covering real sports. She picked up the napkin where she'd written, "Vinnie Jordan Story, 2 p.m., and stared at it. What if this was finally her break? What if this mysterious caller really did have something big? Sarah's laptop chimed with an email. It was from Frank Morrison, sent just 5 minutes ago. Chen, need you to cover St. Ignatius vs. Brother Rice tomorrow afternoon. Game starts at 4 p.m. Don't be late. Another high school game. Another chance to write about 17-year-old kids, while the real stories went to her male colleagues. She looked at the napkin again. If she met Vinnie at 2 p.m., she could still make the high school game at 4 p.m. No harm in listening to what he had to say. Sarah opened a new browser window and searched for recent news about Michael Jordan. The usual stuff came up. Photos from practice, quotes about the upcoming finals against the Utah Jazz, speculation about whether this would be his last season. Jordan looked tired in some of the photos, she noticed. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a few years ago. But tired wasn't a story. Every athlete got tired. She clicked on an older article from 1993 when Jordan had shocked the world by retiring from basketball to play baseball. The article mentioned rumors about gambling debts, whispers that Jordan had been forced out of the league. But those rumors had never been proven. And when Jordan came back in 1995, everyone forgot about them. What if they were true? Sarah's heart started beating faster. If Jordan really did have gambling problems, if there was proof, that would be huge. Bigger than huge. That would be career-making. She thought about her parents again, how they'd looked when she visited last Sunday. Her father's cough was getting worse, probably from all the grease and smoke in the restaurant kitchen. Her mother's arthritis made it hard for her to hold chopsticks steady. They were getting older, working too hard, and Sarah couldn't help them financially because she could barely help herself. A story like this could change everything. Sarah closed her laptop and walked to her bedroom closet. In the back, behind her old college sweatshirts, was a small digital camera she'd bought at a pawn shop. It wasn't much, but it took decent pictures. She set her alarm for 7 a.m. and tried to sleep, but her mind kept racing. What if this was a prank? What if Vinnie was just some crazy fan with too much imagination? What if she was wasting her time? But what if he wasn't? The next morning came gray and drizzly, typical May weather in Chicago. Sarah dressed in her best professional outfit, a navy blue blazer she'd bought at a discount store and black pants that were starting to show wear at the knees. She grabbed her notebook, her pawn shop camera, and caught the red line downtown. Millennium Park was busy with tourists and office workers on their lunch breaks. Sarah found the fountain and checked her watch. 1:55 p.m. She was always early for meetings, a habit her father had taught her. "Time is the only thing you can't buy more of," he'd said. "Don't waste other people's time. And don't let them waste yours." A man approached her at exactly 2 p.m. He was shorter than she'd expected, maybe 50 years old, with graying hair and a face that looked like it had seen too many late nights. He wore a cheap suit and scuffed shoes. "You Sarah Chen?" he asked. "That's me. You're Vinnie?" "Vincent Torino. But my friends call me Vinnie." He looked around nervously, like he expected someone to be watching them. "You bring the camera?" Sarah patted her purse. "Right here. So, what's this about?" Vinnie pulled out a manila envelope, thick with papers and photographs. "Michael Jordan owes me money. A lot of money. $2.3 million, to be exact." Sarah's mouth went dry. $2.3 million? Poker games. Atlantic City, mostly. Some in Chicago, too. Your boy's got a serious gambling problem. And he's in deep with some people who don't take IOUs. Vinny opened the envelope and showed Sarah the contents. There were photographs of Jordan at what looked like private poker games, sitting at green felt tables with stacks of chips in front of him. There were receipts with Jordan's signature, IOUs written on hotel stationery, and what looked like bank withdrawal slips. "Jesus," Sarah whispered. "Gets better," Vinny said. "You know why he really retired in '93? Wasn't about his daddy's death, that's for sure. Commissioner Stern told him to take a break or face suspension. Jordan picked baseball because it looked better than admitting he had a gambling problem." Sarah studied the photographs. They looked real, but in the age of computers, photos could be faked. Still, the detail was incredible. She could see Jordan's face clearly in several shots, and he definitely looked like he was concentrating on cards. "Why come to me?" Sarah asked. "Why not take this to the Sun-Times or Channel 7? Vinny smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "Because you're hungry. You want to make a name for yourself. And because Jordan's camp has connections with the big papers. They'd bury this story. But you? You're small enough to fly under the radar until it's too late for them to stop you." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This man had clearly researched her, knew about her career struggles. That was both flattering and scary. "What do you want in return?" she asked. "Nothing. Just the truth to come out. People deserve to know who their hero really is." Sarah looked at the photos again. If these were real, if Jordan really owed this much money to dangerous people, it would destroy him. His reputation, his family, his legacy, everything. But it would also make her career. "I need to verify this information," Sarah said carefully. "Check sources, confirm details." "Course you do. You're a real reporter, not like those talking heads on TV." Vinny closed the envelope. "But don't take too long. Jordan's got Game 1 of the finals on Sunday. Would be a shame if this came out. Right before the biggest games of his life, wouldn't it?" The threat was subtle, but clear. Vinny expected her to move fast. Sarah took the envelope. It felt heavy in her hands, like it contained more than just papers and photos. It felt like it contained her future. "I'll be in touch," she said. Vinny nodded and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of tourists. Sarah stood by the fountain for a long time, holding the envelope and watching people take pictures of the Chicago skyline. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Frank Morrison. "Where's your St. Ignatius story?" Deadline was an hour ago. Sarah had completely forgotten about the high school game. She'd been so focused on meeting Vinny that she'd missed her assignment. Frank was going to be furious. But as she walked back toward the Red Line station, Sarah realized she didn't care. She had something bigger now, something that could change everything. She just had to decide if she was brave enough to use it. That night, Sarah spread the contents of Vinny's envelope across her kitchen table. The photos, the receipts, the IOUs, it all looked convincing. But she'd learned in journalism school not to trust anything at face value. She made a list of things to verify: the dates on the receipts, the locations of the poker games, the signatures on the IOUs. She'd need to find independent sources, people who could confirm Jordan's gambling activities. Her phone rang. Frank Morrison's name appeared on the caller ID. "Chen, what the hell happened today? I sent you to cover one simple basketball game, and you disappear." "I'm sorry, Frank. Something came up. A source with information about—" "I don't care if the Pope called you personally. When I give you an assignment, you do it. This is your job, Sarah. Start acting like it matters to you." The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, feeling the familiar sting of disappointment. But this time, it was mixed with something else. determination. Frank Morrison had no idea what she was sitting on. None of them did. In a few days, when this story broke, they'd all know her name. Sarah opened her laptop and started typing. Sources close to NBA superstar Michael Jordan confirmed that the Chicago Bulls shooting guard owes significant gambling debts to... She stopped. This wasn't how to start. She needed more than Vinny's word. She needed proof that would hold up under scrutiny. Sarah picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. Marcus Williams. He'd been a security guard for the Bulls until last year, when budget cuts eliminated his position. Sarah had interviewed him once for a small story about arena security. If anyone would know about Jordan's after-hours activities, it would be Marcus. She dialed his number, her heart pounding. This was it. This was where her real investigation would begin. "Hello?" Marcus answered on the third ring. "Hi, Marcus. This is Sarah Chen from the Tribune. I interviewed you last year about..." "I remember. What can I do for you, Miss Chen?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I need to ask you about Michael Jordan. About things that might have happened after games. Places he might have gone." The line went quiet for a long moment. "Miss Chen," Marcus said finally, "I think you better come see me in person. There are some things we shouldn't talk about on the phone." Sarah's hand shook as she wrote down Marcus Williams's address. He lived on the South Side, in a neighborhood she'd driven through but never stopped in. They agreed to meet the next evening at a diner called Mama's Kitchen on 79th Street. "Come alone," Marcus had said, "just like Vinny. And Miss Chen, don't bring that camera. Some conversations need to stay off the record." Sarah spent the next day trying to focus on her regular work, but her mind kept wandering to the envelope hidden in her bedroom closet. She'd moved it there after Frank Morrison had stopped by her apartment unannounced that morning, claiming he needed to check on her after she'd missed the high school game. "You feeling okay, Chen?" Frank had asked, looking around her small apartment with suspicious eyes. "You seem distracted lately." "I'm fine," Sarah had lied. "Just tired." Frank was a good editor, but he was also ambitious. If he knew what she was working on, he might try to take the story away from her or assign it to one of the male reporters. Sarah couldn't let that happen. At 6 p.m., Sarah took the Red Line south to 79th Street. The neighborhood was different from Lincoln Park. Older buildings, more people sitting on stoops, kids playing basketball in empty lots. She found Mama's Kitchen sandwiched between a barber shop and a laundromat. Marcus Williams was already there, sitting in a corner booth with his back to the wall. He was a big man, maybe 6'4", with gentle eyes and calloused hands. Sarah had remembered him being friendly during their first interview, but tonight he looked nervous. "Thanks for meeting me," Sarah said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Order something," Marcus said quietly. "We need to look like we're just having dinner." Sarah ordered coffee and a piece of pie she didn't want. Marcus already had a parfait, plate of meatloaf in front of him, but he wasn't eating much. "So," Sarah said, pulling out her notebook. "About Michael Jordan." Marcus held up his hand. "Put that away. I told you, this is off the record." Sarah reluctantly closed her notebook. "Okay, but I need to understand what you know." Marcus looked around the diner. It was mostly empty except for an elderly couple sharing dessert and a trucker, reading a newspaper at the counter. "I worked security for the Bulls for 8 years, Marcus said finally. "My job was to make sure the players got where they needed to go safely. Sometimes that meant driving them places after games." "What kind of places?" "Different places. Restaurants, clubs, parties." Marcus paused. "Sometimes other places." Sarah waited. She'd learned that silence often made people keep talking. "Look, Miss Chen, Mr. Jordan was always good to me. Always. Treated me with respect. Asked about my kids. Gave me Christmas bonuses. Helped pay for my daughter's school clothes when times were tight. But, Sarah prompted. Marcus sighed. But yeah, there were nights I drove him to poker games, private games, usually in hotel suites or private clubs. Atlantic City was a regular thing during the off-season. Sarah's heart started beating faster. This confirmed what Vinny had told her. How often? She asked. Maybe once or twice a month during the season. More in the summer. Look, it wasn't my business what he did when we got there. I just waited in the car or the lobby until he was ready to leave. Did you ever see him lose money? Large amounts? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I saw him write checks, big checks, and I heard conversations, phone calls he'd make in the car afterward. What kind of conversations? Stressed conversations. About money, about needing more time to pay. One night, must have been early '93, he was on the phone for 20 minutes trying to explain to someone why he couldn't cover a bet. Sarah wished she could take notes. She was trying to remember everything Marcus was saying. That was around the time he retired the first time, she observed. Marcus nodded slowly. The timing wasn't a coincidence, if you ask me. But Miss Chen, you didn't hear that from me. Why are you telling me this? You said Jordan was good to you. Because he was good to me. And I'm worried about him. Marcus finally took a bite of his meatloaf. The people he was playing with, some of them weren't. The kind of people you want to owe money to. What do you mean? I mean, I recognized some faces from the newspapers. Crime section, if you know what I mean. Sarah felt a chill. If Jordan was gambling with organized crime figures, this story was bigger than she'd imagined. Are you willing to go on the record with any of this? She asked. Marcus shook his head immediately. No way. I got a family to protect. 3 kids and a wife who works at the post office. We can't afford trouble. What if I kept your name out of it? Used you as an anonymous source? Miss Chen, I like you. You seem like good people. But I got to think about my family first. I'm telling you this because I'm worried about Mr. Jordan. Not because I want to hurt him. Sarah understood. She had sources in other stories who felt the same way, wanting to help, but afraid of the consequences. Is there anyone else who might talk? Other security guards, drivers, people who worked with the team? Marcus thought for a moment. There's a guy named Eddie Polk. Used to deal cards at some of the private games in Atlantic City. He's had some hard times lately. Lost his job, behind on rent. Might be willing to talk if there was money involved. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying Eddie's desperate. Desperate people sometimes make choices they wouldn't normally make. Marcus wrote Eddie's phone number on a napkin and slid it across the table. But Miss Chen, be careful. This isn't just about basketball or gambling. There are people involved who don't like reporters asking questions. After dinner, Sarah drove back to her apartment with Eddie Polk's phone number burning a hole in her pocket. She sat in her car outside her building for 10 minutes, trying to decide if she should call him tonight or wait until morning. She decided to call. Yeah? Eddie answered on the first ring. His voice was rough, older than Marcus's. Hi, is this Eddie Polk? My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a reporter with the Chicago Tribune. I'm working on a story about what? About Michael Jordan and some poker games you might have been involved with. The line went quiet for so long that Sarah thought Eddie had hung up. Who gave you my number? He asked finally. I can't reveal my sources, but I'm hoping you might be willing to talk to me about some card games in Atlantic City. Private games that Jordan might have attended. Lady, I don't know what you think you know, but I don't talk to reporters. I understand you might be concerned about— You understand nothing. Eddie's voice got harder. You have no idea who you're messing with. Mr. Polk, I'm just trying to get the truth. If there's a story here that affects the public— The public? You think the public cares about the truth? They care about their hero staying perfect. They don't want to know what happens after the cameras stop rolling. Sarah sensed an opening. So, there is something to know? Eddie was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice was tired. Meet me tomorrow night. Frankie's Bar on Atlantic Avenue, 9 o'clock. Come alone and bring cash. Information ain't free. The line went dead. Sarah sat in her car, engine running, trying to process what had just happened. 2 sources in 2 days, both confirming that Jordan had gambling connections, both scared to talk openly. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Haven't heard from you in days. Everything okay? Sarah started to type back that everything was fine, then stopped. Nothing was fine. She was investigating the biggest athlete in Chicago, possibly putting herself in danger, and she couldn't tell anyone about it. Instead, she typed, "Working on something big. Will call soon. Love you." Her mother texted back immediately, "Be careful, Sarah. Some things are too big for one person to handle alone." Sarah stared at the message. Her mother had no idea what she was working on, but somehow she'd given exactly the advice Sarah needed to hear. Maybe this was too big for her to handle alone, but she'd come too far to stop now. The next evening, Sarah drove to Frankie's Bar with $500 in cash, money she'd borrowed from her savings account, which left her with barely enough to pay rent. The bar was dark and smoky, filled with men drinking beer and watching baseball on old televisions. Eddie Polk was sitting at the end of the bar, nursing a whiskey. He was thin and pale, with nervous eyes that kept darting toward the door. Sarah slid onto the stool next. To him. "You the reporter?" he asked without looking at her. "Sarah Chen?" Eddie finished his whiskey and ordered another. "You buyin'?" "Sure." Sarah signaled the bartender for 2 drinks. "I dealt cards for 15 years, Eddie said. Private games, high stakes. Players included businessmen, politicians, athletes. Your boy Jordan was a regular." "How regular?" "Summer of '92. He was there twice a week. Always played Texas Hold'em, always bought in for 50 grand minimum." Sarah tried not to show her surprise. $50,000 was more money than her parents made in a year. Did he win? Eddie laughed bitterly. Nobody wins in the long run. House always gets its cut. And Jordan played like he thought he was as good at cards as he was at basketball. Meaning he lost? Meaning he lost big. Real big. By the end of that summer, he was into some people for serious money. How serious? Eddie looked around the bar again, then leaned closer to Sarah. 2 million, maybe more. And these weren't the kind of people who took IOUs. What happened? What happened is your hero got scared, started missing games, making excuses why he couldn't play. Then all of a sudden, he's retiring from basketball to play baseball. Eddie laughed again. Baseball? Like anyone believed that. Story. Sarah slid the envelope with the cash across the bar. Eddie pocketed it without counting. You got proof of any of this? Sarah asked. I got memories. I got stories. But proof? The kind of proof that holds up in court. Eddie shook his head. People like that don't leave paper trails. Would you be willing to go on the record? Let me use your name? Hell no. You think I want to end up like… Eddie stopped himself. Like who? Nobody. Forget I said anything. but Sarah wouldn't let it go. Like who, Eddie? Who ended up like what? Eddie finished his second whiskey and stood up. Lady, you seem nice. You remind me of my daughter. So let me give you some advice. Find a different story. This one's got teeth. He walked toward the door, then turned back. And Miss Chen? If anyone asks, we never met. Sarah sat at the bar for another hour, nursing her beer and thinking about what Eddie had said. He'd been about to mention someone who'd ended up in trouble for knowing too much. Someone who'd paid a price for getting involved. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Stop digging, or you'll end up like the old man. The line went dead. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She looked around the bar, suddenly aware that anyone could be watching her. The bartender, the men playing pool in the corner, the couple sharing nachos in a booth. She paid her tab quickly and headed for the door, her heart pounding. As she walked to her car, she kept looking over her shoulder, expecting to see someone following her. The drive home felt like it took forever. Every car behind her seemed suspicious. Every red light made her more nervous. When she finally reached her apartment building, Sarah sat in her car for 10 minutes, watching for anyone who might be watching her. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Last warning! Sarah ran into her building and up the stairs, to her apartment. She locked the door and checked all the windows, then sat on her couch with the lights off, trying to decide what to do. Someone was threatening her. Someone who knew she was asking questions about Jordan's gambling. Someone who'd referred to the old man. But what old man? Sarah thought about calling the police. But what would she tell them? That she'd received threatening phone calls while investigating Michael Jordan? They'd think she was crazy. She thought about calling Frank Morrison, but that would mean explaining what she'd been working on without his permission. Finally, she called the one person she trusted most in the world. Sarah? It's almost midnight. What's wrong? Her mother's voice was concerned. Mom, I think I might be in trouble. What kind of trouble? Sarah started to explain but stopped. She couldn't tell her mother about the investigation, the threats, the danger she might be in. It would only worry her parents, and they had enough problems already. Just work stuff. I'm working on something that might be bigger than I can handle. Then don't handle it alone, Sarah. Ask for help. There's no shame in admitting when something is too big for one person. After hanging up, Sarah sat in her dark apartment and thought about her mother's words. Maybe she did need help, but who could she turn to? Then she had an idea. If someone was threatening her to stop investigating Jordan's gambling, maybe she should go straight to the source. Maybe she should talk to Michael Jordan himself. Getting to Michael Jordan was like trying to reach the president. Sarah spent 3 days calling the Bulls' main office, Jordan's agent, his publicist, and anyone else she could find with connections to the basketball star. Every call ended the same way. Mr. Jordan doesn't give interviews during playoff season. Finally, Sarah tried a different approach. She called Tim Hallam, the Bulls' media relations director, and told him she was working on a story about Jordan's charitable work in Chicago. It wasn't completely a lie. If this story helped expose something bigger, it might actually help people. I just need 15 minutes, Sarah pleaded. I'm on deadline for a positive piece about his community involvement. Tim sighed. Sarah, you know how crazy things are right now. Game 1 is Sunday. Michael's focused on basketball, not interviews. 10 minutes then. 5 minutes. Please, Tim. This could really help my career. There was a long pause. Okay, look. He sometimes comes in early to shoot around before practice. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. at the United Center. I can't promise anything, but if you happen to be there, I'll be there. And Sarah? This conversation never happened. Sarah barely slept that night. She kept thinking about the threatening phone calls, about Eddie Polk's warning, about the envelope of photos hidden in her closet. What if Jordan denied everything? What if he had her thrown out of the building? What if whoever was threatening her was watching the United Center? But she had to try. This story was the biggest thing that had ever happened to her career. She couldn't let fear stop her now. At 5:45 a.m., Sarah parked outside the United Center. The building looked massive and empty in the early morning light. A few cars were in the parking lot, probably security guards and maintenance staff. Sarah grabbed her notebook and the envelope with Vinny's photos, took a deep breath, and walked to the media entrance. The security guard recognized her press credentials and let her in without question. Sarah had covered enough Bulls games to be familiar to the staff. She made her way through the empty corridors toward the practice court, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She found Jordan alone on the court, shooting jump shots in the dim light. He was wearing practice gear, shorts and a Bulls t-shirt, and his movements were smooth and automatic. Swish, swish, swish. Even at 6 a.m., every shot was perfect. Sarah watched from the tunnel for a moment, feeling suddenly small. This was Michael Jordan, the most famous athlete in the world. 6-time NBA champion, global icon, marketing phenomenon. And she was about to accuse him of having serious gambling problems. Jordan noticed her standing there and stopped shooting. He was taller than she'd expected, and his presence filled the entire gym. "You're the reporter," he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah Chen, Chicago Tribune. Her voice sounded smaller than she'd intended. Jordan bounced the basketball once, then held it against his hip. "Tim said you wanted to talk about charity work." I lied. The words came out before Sarah could stop them. "I'm here about something else." Jordan's eyes hardened. "What?" Sarah pulled out her folder. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Mr. Jordan, I have evidence that you owe significant gambling debts. Photos from Atlantic City, witness statements, financial records." Jordan held up his hand. "Stop." The gym went completely quiet. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. "Before you destroy my life," Jordan said, his voice calm but his eyes intense, "let me ask you something. What do you know about my father?" Sarah was caught off guard. This wasn't how she'd expected him to respond. "Your father was murdered in 1993. I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't see what—" "Do you know where he was killed?" "North Carolina, Highway 74. But do you know where he was coming from that night?" Sarah hesitated. This information wasn't in any of her research. No. Jordan walked over to the bench and sat down heavily. For a moment, the intimidating superstar looked vulnerable, almost fragile. "He was coming back from Atlantic City," Jordan said quietly. "Did you know that?" Sarah felt her confidence starting to slip. "No, I didn't. My father loved to gamble, loved it more than he should have, more than was good for him or our family." Jordan stared at the basketball in his hands. "And I was trying to pay off his debts." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. "What? The money you think I owe? The gambling debts your sources told you about? That was never mine to begin with." Sarah sat down on the bleachers, her mind racing. "I don't understand." Jordan looked up at her. "My father got in deep with some bad people. Really bad people. By the summer of 1992, he owed almost $2 million to bookies and loan sharks in Chicago and Atlantic City. Why didn't you just pay them directly?" "Because my father was proud. He wouldn't take money from me. not for gambling debts. Said he'd gotten himself into the mess. He'd get himself out. Jordan's voice got quieter. But these weren't the kind of people who accepted payment plans. Sarah tried to process what she was hearing. So I started playing in the same games my father played in. High-stakes poker, private clubs, hotel suites. I'd sit down at the table with $50,000 and make sure I lost it to the right people. You lost on purpose? Every hand. Every night. It was the only way to get money to the people my father owed without him knowing I was helping him. Jordan bounced the ball once. Do you know how hard it is to lose at poker when you're trying to lose? These guys weren't stupid. I had to make it look real. Sarah's entire story was falling apart. But the photos, the witnesses, are all real. I was at those games. I did lose money, lots of money. But I wasn't gambling, Miss Chen. I was paying my father's debts. Then why all the secrecy? Why not just tell people the truth? Jordan stood up and started pacing. Because it would have destroyed my father. James Jordan was a proud man. If the world knew his son was secretly paying his gambling debts, it would have killed him. But he's... Sarah stopped herself. Dead? Yeah, he's dead. Killed on July 23rd, 1993. 2 weeks after I thought I'd cleared all his debts. Jordan's voice was filled with pain and anger. Turns out, there was one more guy. Someone we didn't know about. Someone who wanted to send a message. Sarah felt sick. You think your father was murdered because of gambling debts? I think my father was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But, yeah, I think the gambling made him a target. The police said it was a random robbery gone wrong. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Is that why you retired? Jordan nodded slowly. I couldn't risk putting my family in more danger. I couldn't trust that I'd found all the people my father owed money to. So I walked away from basketball. But you came back. After 2 years, yeah. The investigations were done. The people responsible for my father's death were in prison, and I thought it was safe. But I've never stopped wondering if there was more to it. Sarah sat in stunned silence. Everything she thought she knew about this story was wrong. Jordan wasn't a gambling addict. He was a son trying to save his father. The evidence that seemed so damning actually showed something completely different. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked. Because I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of people thinking I'm something I'm not. And because... Jordan paused. Because I think whoever gave you that information wanted you to destroy me. What do you mean? Think about it. Someone hands you photos and documents that make me look like a gambling addict, right before the biggest games of my career. Someone who knows exactly how to package the story to cause maximum damage. Jordan looked directly at Sarah. That's not a coincidence. Sarah thought about Vinnie Torino, about how he'd known exactly what to say to convince her to pursue the story. About how he'd researched her background, knew about her career struggles and financial problems. You think I was set up? I think we both were. The question is, by who? Before Sarah could answer, the lights in the gym suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, casting eerie shadows across the court. What the hell? Jordan muttered. Then they heard footsteps in the tunnel. Multiple people moving quickly, but quietly. Sarah grabbed Jordan's arm. We need to get out of here, she whispered. Why? Because I've been getting threatening phone calls since I started investigating this story. Someone doesn't want the truth to come out. Jordan's expression changed. Instantly, the vulnerable, grieving son disappeared, replaced by the fierce competitor who'd won 6 championships. "This way," he said, grabbing Sarah's hand. "There's another exit through the locker room." They moved quickly across the court, staying low. Sarah could hear voices now, at least 3 different people talking in hushed tones. "Search the gym," someone said. "They're here somewhere." Jordan led Sarah through a door she'd never noticed before, into a corridor that connected the practice court to the main arena. They moved in darkness, Jordan navigating from memory. "My car's in the parking lot," Sarah whispered. "Too risky. They probably know what you drive." Jordan pulled out his phone. "I'm calling security." "No," Sarah said quickly. "What if they're involved? What if this goes deeper than we think?" Jordan stopped walking. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that someone went to a lot of trouble to set this story up. Someone who knew about your father's gambling, who had access to real photos and documents, who knew exactly how to manipulate me into investigating you." Sarah's mind was racing. That takes resources, connections, maybe even access to Bull's security. They reached another door. Jordan peered through the window into the main arena. "Clear," he said. "We can get to my car from here." As they moved through the empty United Center, Sarah realized that everything had changed. She'd come here to confront Jordan about gambling debts, but instead, she'd uncovered something much bigger and more dangerous. Someone had wanted her to destroy Michael Jordan's reputation. Someone with enough power and resources to manufacture evidence and orchestrate an elaborate setup. But who? And more importantly, why? Jordan's car was a black Mercedes, parked in a reserved spot near the players' entrance. They made it there without seeing anyone, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Get in," Jordan said, unlocking the doors. As they drove away from the United Center, Sarah looked back at the building. Someone was standing in one of the windows, watching them leave. "Jordan," she said. "Michael. After what we just went through, I think you can call me Michael." "Michael, there's something else. Last night, someone called me and said I'd end up like the old man if I didn't stop investigating." Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "The old man? They were talking about my father." "That's what I thought. But Michael, if they killed your father to keep him quiet about something, and now they're threatening me, then whatever this is about, it's bigger than gambling debts." Sarah stared out the window at the Chicago skyline. She'd started this investigation thinking she was chasing a story about a basketball player's gambling addiction. Now she was running for her life, trying to uncover a conspiracy that might have cost Michael Jordan his father. "What do we do now?" she asked. Michael was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was filled with determination. "Now we find out who really killed my father, and why they want to destroy me." Sarah realized that her investigation was just beginning, and this time, she wouldn't be working alone. Michael drove to a 24-hour diner on the north side, far from the United Center. They sat in a back booth, surrounded by empty coffee cups and the quiet hum of early morning customers. Sarah had her notebook out, but this time it wasn't to attack Michael Jordan. It was to help him find the truth. "Tell me everything about your father's gambling," Sarah said. "Start from the beginning." Michael stared into his coffee cup. "Dad always loved games. Cards, dice, betting on baseball games. When I was a kid, it was just fun. $20 poker games with his friends on Friday nights." "When did it get serious?" "Early 80s, when I started making money in college. Suddenly, Dad's bets got bigger. Instead of $20, it was $200. Then, $2,000. Michael's voice was heavy with old pain. "I should have seen it coming." Sarah took notes carefully. "Did he ask you for money?" "Never, directly. Dad was too proud for that, but Mom would call me, crying, saying they were behind on the mortgage. Or Dad would mention that his car needed repairs, but they couldn't afford it. Michael shook his head. I'd send money for the house or the car, not knowing it was really going to pay bookies. When did you find out the truth? Michael was quiet for a long moment. Summer of 1992. We just won our second championship. I was on top of the world. Then Dad called me at 3 a.m., drunk and scared. Sarah waited for him to continue. He told me everything. The gambling, the debts, the people who were threatening him. $2 million, Sarah. My father owed $2 million to people who break legs for a living. That's when you started playing in the poker games? I flew to Chicago the next day, met with Dad, tried to convince him to let me just write a check and end it. But he wouldn't hear it. Said it was his mess to clean up. Michael laughed bitterly. So I had to get creative. Michael explained how he'd researched the people his father owed money to. Most were small-time bookies who ran card games in hotel suites and private clubs. The key was finding games where those specific people would be playing. I'd call my father and ask about his plans for the weekend. He'd mention a game at the Lau, Palmer House, or a private club in Atlantic City. Then I'd find a way to get invited to that same game. How? Money talks. I'd have someone approach the organizer, say that Michael Jordan wanted to play some cards. Most of these guys were starstruck. Having me at their table was worth the risk. Sarah was amazed by the complexity of it all. And you'd lose on purpose? Had to make it look real. These weren't stupid people. If I sat down and immediately started throwing money around, they'd get suspicious. Michael smiled slightly. So I'd play normally for a while. Win some hands, lose some hands, then I'd start making bigger bets and worse decisions. How much would you lose in one night? Depended on who was there. If the guy my father owed $50,000 to was playing, I'd make sure to lose at least that much to him. Sometimes more, to cover interest. Sarah did quick math in her head. How often were you doing this? Every weekend for almost a year. Sometimes twice a week during the off-season. Atlantic City, Chicago, Las Vegas. Wherever my father's creditors were playing. Didn't anyone get suspicious? Your teammates, coaches, family? Michael nodded. That's when the rumors started. People saw me at casinos, at private games. They assumed I was gambling for myself. The media started asking questions, but I couldn't tell them the truth without exposing my father. Sarah remembered the timeline. This was during your best season. Statistically, basketball was my escape, the only place where I could be in control, where everything made sense. I'd lose $100,000 on Friday night, then score 50 points on Sunday. The game was the only thing keeping me sane. But you said you thought you'd paid off all his debts by 1993? Michael's expression darkened. That's what I thought. Dad and I went through all his records, made a list of everyone he owed money to. By July 1993, I'd covered every debt on that list. We thought it was over, but it wasn't. 2 weeks later, Dad was driving back from Atlantic City when he was killed. The police said it was a carjacking gone wrong. 2 young men were arrested and convicted. Case closed. Sarah could hear the doubt in his voice. But you don't believe it was random. Dad called me the night before he died, said he was worried about something, said he'd been keeping records of his gambling activities and he'd noticed some strange patterns. What kind of patterns? Michael pulled out his phone and scrolled through old notes. Dad was good with numbers, always kept detailed records of his wins and losses. But he also started writing down other things he noticed at the games. Like what? Like the same people showing up at different games in different cities. Like money changing hands that didn't seem to be connected to gambling. Like conversations he overheard about business deals and political connections. Sarah felt her reporter instincts kicking in. He was documenting something bigger than gambling. That's what I think. Dad told me on the phone that he had information that could hurt some important people. I told him to call the police, to stay safe, but he never got the chance. Michael showed Sarah his phone. He'd saved every voicemail his father had left in the months before his death. Listen to this. 1. He left it 3 days before he was killed. Michael played the message. James Jordan's voice was shaky but determined. Michael, I've been thinking about those games, about the people I've been seeing. This isn't just about gambling anymore. I think these people are using the games to move dirty money. Real dirty money. I'm going to start writing down names and dates. If something happens to me, you need to know what I found. Sarah felt chills running down her arms. Your father was uncovering money laundering. Or worse. Dad mentioned seeing the same faces at games in Chicago, Atlantic City, and Las Vegas. People who weren't there to gamble, just to watch and have quiet conversations with the organizers. Did he ever mention specific names? Michael nodded. Few. But Sarah, some of these names. They're people in positions of power. City officials, federal judges, businessmen with government contracts. Sarah's mind was racing. Do you still have your father's records? Some of them. The police took most of his personal effects as evidence, but they returned them to my mother after the trial. I've been keeping everything in a safe deposit box. We need to see those records. Michael checked his watch. The bank doesn't open until 9 a.m. But Sarah, there's something else you need to know. What? I don't think my father was the only one who noticed the patterns. I think there were other people asking questions, and I think some of them ended up dead. Sarah's blood ran cold. What do you mean? 3 other people who played in those games died in the 2 years after my father's murder. All of them ruled. Accidents or random crimes. A car crash in Las Vegas. A mugging in Atlantic City. A house fire in Chicago. You think they were murdered? I think they knew too much. And I think whoever killed them has been watching me ever since, waiting to see if I'd figure it out. Sarah thought about the threatening phone calls, about Vinnie Torino's perfect setup, about the people searching for them at the United Center. They're trying to discredit you before you can expose the truth. That's my theory. Make me look like a gambling addict, destroy my reputation, make sure nobody believes anything I say about my father's death. But why now? It's been 5 years. Michael was quiet for a moment. Because I've been investigating quietly, hiring private detectives, following money trails, trying to identify the people my father saw at those games. And I think I'm getting close to something big. How close? Close enough that they're scared. Close enough to try to destroy me before I can reveal what I've found. Sarah looked around the diner. The morning crowd was starting to arrive. Construction workers grabbing coffee, office workers reading newspapers. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that they were sitting near a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of Chicago society. Michael, if what you're saying is true, we're in serious danger. I know. But Sarah, I can't live with this secret anymore. I'm 35 years old. This might be my last chance to win a championship. And I can't do it, knowing that my father's killers are still out there. Sarah made a decision that would change both their lives. Then let's find them. Michael smiled for the first time since they'd met. "You're really willing to help me? Your father was murdered for trying to expose corruption. Someone tried to set me up to destroy your reputation. And whoever's behind this thinks they can intimidate us into staying quiet." Sarah closed her notebook and looked Michael in the eyes. They picked the wrong reporter. Michael's phone buzzed with a text message. He looked at it, and his face went pale. "What is it?" Sarah asked. Michael showed her the screen. The message was from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll join your father sooner than planned." Sarah felt her stomach drop. They know we're working together, which means they're watching us right now. Sarah looked around the diner with new eyes. Any of these normal-looking people could be monitoring them. The businessman reading his newspaper, the construction worker checking his phone, the waitress refilling coffee cups. What do we do? Michael stood up and threw money on the table. We go to the bank. We get my father's records. And then we find out exactly who we're dealing with. As they walked toward the exit, Sarah noticed a man in a suit at the counter who seemed to be paying too much attention to them. When they left the diner, he followed them outside. "Michael," Sarah whispered. "I see him. Get in the car." They drove away quickly, but Sarah could see the man in the rearview mirror, talking on his phone and writing down Michael's license plate number. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," Michael said. "That's either very good or very bad." "What do you mean?" Sarah thought about everything she'd learned in journalism school about investigative reporting. Either they're getting desperate and making mistakes, or they're confident enough that they don't care if we know we're being watched. Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. There's only one way to find out. As they drove toward the bank, Sarah realized that her life had completely changed in the span of 6 hours. She'd gone from investigating a gambling scandal to uncovering a murder conspiracy that reached into the heart of Chicago's power structure. And the most dangerous part was just beginning. Game 1 of the NBA Finals was electric. The United Center buzzed with 21,000 fans wearing red and black, all cheering for Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. Sarah sat in the media section, but she couldn't focus on basketball. Every few minutes, she found herself scanning the crowd, looking for faces that seemed out of place. Michael played like a man with something to prove. He scored 33 points, grabbed 7 rebounds, and led the Bulls to a 96-91 victory over the Utah Jazz. But Sarah could see the tension in his movements, the way his eyes darted to the stands between free throws. After the game, the locker room was chaos. Reporters shouted questions while cameras flashed. Sarah waited until most of the media had left, then approached Michael near his locker. "Great game," she said quietly. "Thanks." Michael was still sweating, a towel draped around his neck. "Did you see anything unusual in the crowd?" "A few people who seemed more interested in watching you than the game, but that could be normal." Michael nodded. "Meet me in the parking garage in 20 minutes. Level B, Section 12. We need to talk." Sarah left the locker room and made her way through the celebrating crowd. Outside the arena, Chicago felt alive with championship energy. Cars honked their horns, fans chanted in the streets, and the whole city seemed to pulse with excitement. But Sarah felt like she was walking through a movie set, surrounded by actors who didn't know they were being watched by dangerous people. She found Michael waiting by his car in the parking garage. The concrete structure was mostly empty now, just a few scattered vehicles, and the echo of footsteps from late departing fans. "We went to the bank this morning," Michael said without greeting her. "Got my father's records." "And?" Michael pulled out a cardboard box from his trunk. "And you were right. Dad wasn't just documenting gambling. He was tracking something much bigger." They sat in Michael's car and went through James Jordan's notebooks. The pages were filled with dates, names, amounts of money, and locations. At first glance, it looked like standard gambling records. But as Sarah studied the entries more carefully, she began to see patterns. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a series of entries from March 1993. "Your father lost money to the same 5 people over 3 different weekends. But the amounts are all exactly the same, $50,000 each time." "That's not how gambling works," Michael agreed. "Real gambling has ups and downs, different amounts, random patterns." Sarah turned the page. And here, he's noting conversations he overheard. Tony mentioned the riverboat project. Vincent asked about zoning permits. Discussion about construction contracts. Dad was hearing business deals being discussed at poker tables. Not just any business deals. Look at the amounts involved. Sarah showed Michael another page. "Your father notes that $3 million changed hands in one night, but it wasn't gambling money. He writes, payment for city contract work." Michael whistled softly. $3 million in cash, paid at a poker game. That's money laundering. Someone was using the gambling operation to clean dirty money from construction contracts, riverboat casinos, maybe other city projects. They continued reading. James Jordan had been methodical in his record-keeping, noting not just what he saw, but what he heard. Names of politicians, businessmen, and contractors appeared repeatedly. Some Sarah recognized from local news coverage. "Michael, look at this name." Sarah pointed to an entry from June 1993. "Vincent Torino. That's the man. Who gave me the photos and documents about your gambling." Michael leaned over to read. Dad wrote Vincent angry about newspaper coverage of riverboat proposal. Says reporters asking too many questions. "Vinny wasn't trying to help me expose your gambling. He was trying to discredit you before you could expose this money laundering operation, which means he's part of it. Has been for years." Sarah felt sick. She'd been completely manipulated, used as a weapon against Michael without even knowing it. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "You couldn't have known. They played this perfectly. Find an ambitious young reporter, give her evidence that looks legitimate, and let her destroy my reputation for them." A car drove slowly past them in the parking garage. Both Sarah and Michael watched it carefully until it disappeared around a corner. "We should go," Michael said. "It's not safe to stay in one place too long." They drove to Sarah's apartment so she could get some clothes and personal items. Michael insisted on coming upstairs with her, worried about her safety. "Pack light," he said as they climbed the stairs. "Just essentials. You can't stay here anymore." "Where am I supposed to go?" "I've got a safe house, property I bought under a different name a few years ago when I was getting threats from crazy fans. Only my lawyer knows about it." Sarah's apartment felt different now, smaller and more vulnerable. She quickly threw clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed her laptop and camera, and gathered important documents. "Ready?" Michael asked. Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. Unknown number. "Don't answer it," Michael warned, but Sarah was curious. She answered on speakerphone. "Miss Chen?" The voice was smooth, educated, with a slight accent. "My name is Anthony Cassio. I represent certain business interests in Chicago." Sarah looked at Michael, who had gone very still. "I'm not interested in whatever you're selling," Sarah said. "Oh, but I think you are. You see, you have something that belongs to my associates. Documents and photographs that were given to you in error. I don't know what you're talking about." "Please don't insult my intelligence, Miss Chen. You met with Vincent Torino. You received certain materials about Mr. Jordan's alleged gambling activities. We would like those materials returned." Sarah's blood ran cold. "And if I refuse? Then You'll discover that Chicago can be a very dangerous city for young reporters who don't know when to stop asking questions. The line went dead. Michael was already moving toward the door. We need to leave. Now. Who is Anthony Cassio? Enforcer for the Chicago outfit. If he's involved, this goes all the way to the top of the crime families. They hurried down the stairs, but Michael stopped suddenly on the second-floor landing. What is it? Sarah whispered. Listen. Sarah heard footsteps in the lobby below them, multiple people moving quietly but quickly. Fire escape, Michael said. They went back up one floor and out the window onto the metal fire escape. From there, they could see two black cars parked. Outside Sarah's building, men in suits were stationed at both the front and back entrances. They're not taking any chances, Michael murmured. They climbed down carefully, avoiding the windows of other apartments. Michael had parked his car 2 blocks away, anticipating they might need an alternate escape route. As they drove through the streets of Chicago, Sarah realized how much her life had changed in just 3 days. She was now a fugitive, running from organized crime figures who wanted to kill her for investigating a story. Where are we going? She asked. Soldier Field. I know it sounds crazy, but it's the last place they'd expect us to go. Plus, I have keys to the building. Why, Soldier Field? Because I need to make some phone calls, and I need to do it from a place where I know the phones aren't tapped. They parked in an empty lot near the stadium and walked to a service entrance. Michael used a key card to get them inside, then led Sarah through dark corridors to an office that overlooked the field. Whose office is this? Sarah asked. Belongs to a friend of mine who works for the Bears. He won't mind us borrowing it. Michael picked up the office phone and dialed a number from memory. Agent Gonzalez? This is Michael Jordan. I need to see you. Tonight. Yes, it's about my father. I have new evidence. No, I can't come to your office. It's not safe. Sarah listened as Michael arranged to meet with someone from the FBI. When he hung up, she asked, You've been working with federal agents? For 2 years, ever since I started finding connections between my father's death and organized crime figures. Agent Rita Gonzalez specializes in financial crimes and money laundering. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Because I wasn't sure I could trust you. For all I knew, you really were just a reporter trying to destroy my reputation. Sarah understood. And now? Now I know we're both targets, which means we're probably both telling the truth. Michael's phone buzzed with a text message. He looked at it and frowned. What now? Sarah asked. It's from Agent Gonzalez. She wants to meet at Soldier Field Parking Lot C at 11 p.m. That's in an hour. Is that normal? No. She usually wants to meet at safe locations, federal buildings, places with security. Michael looked troubled. She's never suggested meeting in a parking lot before. Sarah felt a chill of fear. What if it's not really her? What do you mean? What if someone intercepted your call? What if they're using her identity to set up a trap? Michael stared at his phone. You think the FBI has been compromised? I think if this conspiracy involves city officials and federal judges, it might involve federal agents too. They sat in the dark office, looking out at the empty football field, trying to decide what to do. Sarah thought about Anthony Cassio's phone call, about the men waiting outside her apartment, about Vincent Torino's elaborate setup. Michael, what if we don't go to the meeting? Then we lose our best chance to get federal protection and support. And if it is a trap, then we're walking into an ambush that could get us both killed. Sarah looked at her watch. 10:15 p.m. In 45 minutes, they had to decide whether to trust the FBI or assume that even federal agents couldn't be trusted. There's a third option, Sarah said slowly. What? We go to the meeting, but we don't go alone. We bring backup. What kind of backup? Sarah smiled for the first time in hours. The kind that organized crime figures hate most. Live television. Coverage. Michael stared at her. You want to call the media? I want to call Channel 7 News. Tell them that Michael Jordan has explosive information about corruption in Chicago city government, and he's meeting with the FBI at Soldier Field at 11 p.m. That's incredibly risky. So is trusting the FBI when we don't know how deep this corruption goes. Michael thought for a moment. If we do this, there's no going back. Once this story breaks on live television, everyone will know what we've discovered. Which means they can't kill us quietly anymore. Hard to make our deaths look like accidents when we've just exposed a major conspiracy on live TV. Michael picked up the phone. You sure about this? Sarah thought about her parents, working late shifts at their restaurant to pay the bills. About Marcus Williams, too scared to go on the record because he had a family to protect. About James, Jordan, murdered for trying to expose the truth. I'm sure it's time to stop being afraid and start fighting back. Michael dialed Channel 7 News. This is Michael Jordan. I have information about a major corruption scandal involving city officials and organized crime. I'll be at Soldier Field Parking Lot C at 11 p.m. with documentary evidence. Yes, I'm serious. Yes, you can bring cameras. As they prepared to leave Soldier Field, Sarah realized that in 1 hour, everything would change. Either they would expose the conspiracy that killed James Jordan, or they would walk into a trap that might kill them both. But they couldn't live in fear forever. It was time to discover the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. At 10:45 p.m., Sarah and Michael sat in his car in Soldier Field Parking Lot C, watching for signs of the FBI, the media, or anyone else who might show up. The lot was mostly empty, except for a few scattered cars belonging to night security guards. Channel 7 should be here any minute, Sarah said, checking her phone for the third time. So should Agent Gonzalez. Michael drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. If it really is her. A white van pulled into the parking lot with Channel 7 News painted on the side. Sarah felt a wave of relief. At least part of their plan was working. There's Rebecca Martinez, Sarah said, recognizing the veteran news anchor stepping out of the van. She's been covering Chicago politics for 15 years. If anyone will understand how big this story is, it's her. A cameraman and sound technician followed Rebecca toward their car. Michael rolled down his window as she approached. Mr. Jordan, I have to admit, when you called our newsroom an hour ago, we thought it might be a prank. Rebecca's voice was professional but curious. You said you have evidence of corruption involving your father's death? I do. But we need to wait for the FBI agent before... Headlights swept across the parking lot as a black sedan entered. It moved slowly, like the driver was looking for something specific. That could be Agent Gonzalez, Michael said. But as the car got closer, Sarah noticed something wrong. Michael, that's not an FBI car. Look at the license plates. The plates were standard Illinois plates, not government-issued. Real FBI agents drove cars with federal plates. We need to go, Sarah said urgently. Right now. But before Michael could start the engine, 2 more cars entered the parking lot from different directions. They were being surrounded. Rebecca, Sarah called out to the news crew, get your camera rolling. Whatever happens next, make sure you film everything. Rebecca immediately understood. She signaled to her cameraman, who shouldered his equipment, and hit the record button. The first black sedan stopped 20 feet away. 2 men in suits got out, walking toward Michael's car, with the confident stride of people who were used to intimidating others. Mr. Jordan, one of them called out, we need to talk. I'm not getting out of this car, Michael replied through his partially opened window. I'm afraid that's not an option. The second man pulled out a gun, holding it low, but visible. Sarah's blood turned to ice. This is Sarah Chen, reporting live from Soldier Field. Rebecca Martinez spoke into her microphone, standing just outside the range of the gunman. We're witnessing what appears to be an armed confrontation involving Chicago Bulls star Michael Jordan. The gunman looked toward the news crew with annoyance. This wasn't how they'd planned things to go. Tell your friends with the cameras to leave, the first man said to Michael. I don't think so, Michael replied. This is a public parking lot. They have every right to be here. The third car had positioned itself to block the exit. Sarah counted at least 6 men total, all wearing similar dark suits, all moving with military precision. Mr. Jordan, you have something that belongs to our employer. Documents and photographs. We're here to collect them. I don't know what you're talking about. Your father's notebooks. The materials Vincent Torino gave to Miss Chen. We know you have them. Sarah's heart pounded. These men knew everything about their investigation. Those documents are evidence. In a federal investigation, Michael said, I've already turned copies over to the FBI. It was a lie, but a good one. The men exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this response. We're going to need proof of that, the gunman said. Then call Agent Rita Gonzalez at the Chicago FBI field office. She can confirm that I've been working with federal authorities. Rebecca Martinez stepped closer, holding her microphone toward the conversation. Excuse me, could you gentlemen state your names for the record? Are you law enforcement officers? The men ignored her, but Sarah could see they were getting frustrated. Having live television coverage was making it impossible for them to handle this situation quietly. Mr. Jordan, we're running out of patience, the first man said. Get out of the car. Now. I don't think I will. That's when Sarah noticed something that made her stomach drop. One of the men from the third car was walking around behind the news van, trying to get into position where he could threaten the camera crew. Rebecca! Sarah shouted. Behind you! Rebecca spun around, just as the man reached for her cameraman. But instead of finding an easy target, he found himself face to face with a rolling camera that was broadcasting his image live to thousands of Chicago viewers. Sir, are you planning to assault members of the media? Rebecca asked, shoving her microphone toward his face. The man stepped back, clearly uncomfortable with being filmed. This was supposed to be a quiet intimidation, not a public confrontation broadcast across Chicago. Michael's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and frowned. Agent Gonzalez? He answered. Michael, where are you? I'm at Soldier Field parking. Lot C, but I don't see you anywhere. We're in Lot C. Where are you? I'm in Lot C too. All I see is a Channel 7 news van and some black cars. Sarah and Michael looked at each other with growing understanding. Agent Gonzalez, how many black cars do you see? Michael asked. 3. Why? Those aren't FBI vehicles. We're surrounded by men with guns who claim they want your evidence. There was a pause on the line. Michael, get out of there immediately. Those are not federal agents. I repeat, those are not federal agents. Kind of hard to leave when they've blocked all the exits. Through the phone, they could hear Agent Gonzalez talking to someone else, probably calling for backup. Hold your position, she said. Chicago PD is 2 minutes away. FBI tactical team is 5 minutes out. The lead gunman must have realized their time was running out. He approached Michael's car more aggressively. Last chance, Jordan. Give us the documents or this gets ugly. This is already ugly, Michael replied. You're threatening American citizens at gunpoint on live television. Rebecca Martinez had positioned herself and her camera crew to capture every moment. This is Rebecca Martinez with Channel 7 News, reporting live from what appears to be an attempted armed robbery or kidnapping involving Chicago Bulls superstar Michael Jordan and Chicago Tribune reporter Sarah Chen. Sarah could hear sirens in the distance. The cavalry was coming. The gunmen heard the sirens too. They started looking at each other nervously, realizing their carefully planned intimidation was falling apart. "This isn't over," the lead man said to Michael. "You can't hide behind cameras and cops forever." "Maybe not," Michael replied, "but I can hide behind the truth." "The truth? You want to know the truth about your father?" Sarah felt Michael tense beside her. "Your father wasn't killed because he discovered money laundering," the man continued. "He was killed because he found out about the kids." "What kids?" Michael's voice was barely controlled. "Ask your FBI friend. Ask her what your father really saw at those poker games. Ask her why certain businessmen and politicians were so interested in keeping him quiet." Before Michael could respond, police cars flooded into the parking lot with lights flashing and sirens wailing. The gunmen immediately backed away from Michael's car, hands visible, trying to look like innocent bystanders. But Sarah had heard every word of the conversation, and Rebecca's camera crew had filmed the entire confrontation. As Chicago police officers surrounded the scene, Sarah realized that the man's final words had revealed something even more terrible than money laundering or political corruption. James Jordan had discovered something involving children, and he'd been murdered to keep that secret. "Michael," Sarah said quietly as police officers approached their car. "What did he mean about kids?" Michael's face was pale. "I don't know, but we're going to find out." Agent Rita Gonzalez arrived 10 minutes later, a small woman with steel gray hair and intense eyes. She looked around the parking lot at the police cars, the news crew, and the 6 men in suits who were now being questioned by detectives. "Well," she said to Michael and Sarah, "this is one way to smoke out the bad guys." "Are you really FBI?" Sarah asked. Agent Gonzalez showed her credentials. "Rita Gonzalez, Financial Crimes Division. I've been working with Michael for 2 years, trying to build a case around his father's death. And what have you found? Enough to know that James Jordan was killed by professionals. Enough to know that the 2 men convicted of his murder were probably innocent. And enough to know that whatever your father discovered was big enough to kill 4. Sarah thought about the man's final words. "Agent Gonzalez, he said something about kids. Do you know what that means?" Agent Gonzalez and Michael exchanged a look. "That's the part of the investigation we haven't told you about yet," Agent Gonzalez said. "The part that makes this whole thing even more dangerous than you realize." As the police finished processing the scene and the news crew packed up their equipment, Sarah realized that their investigation had just taken another dark turn. Money laundering and political corruption were bad enough, but if children were involved, if James Jordan had discovered something that put kids at risk, then the people behind his murder weren't just criminals. They were monsters. And now Sarah and Michael were the only ones who could stop them. Agent Gonzalez led Sarah and Michael to a secure FBI facility in downtown Chicago. The building looked like any other office complex, but inside, it buzzed with federal agents working late into the night. They sat in a conference room with thick walls and no windows. "Before we go any further," Agent Gonzalez said, "I need to know that you're both prepared for what I'm about to tell you. Because once you know the truth, there's no going back." Sarah looked at Michael. His jaw was set in the same determined expression she'd seen on the basketball court. "We're ready," Sarah said. Agent Gonzalez opened a thick file folder. Your father wasn't just documenting money laundering, Michael. He stumbled onto something much worse. A human trafficking operation that used the poker games as meeting points. Sarah felt sick. Human trafficking? Children, specifically. Young kids being moved from Chicago to other cities, sold to people who... Agent Gonzalez paused. People who hurt children in ways I don't like to describe. Michael's hands clenched into fists. My father saw this happening? According to our investigation, yes. The poker games weren't just about cleaning dirty money. They were also used to arrange sales, transfers, and payments for trafficking operations. Agent Gonzalez pulled out photographs from the file. They showed the same hotel suites and private clubs that appeared in James Jordan's notebooks, but these photos were taken by hidden FBI cameras. We've been investigating this ring for 3 years, she continued, but every time we get close, witnesses disappear or evidence gets destroyed. Your father was the first person who kept detailed records of what he saw. Sarah studied the photos. How many children are we talking about? We estimate at least 24 kids per year moving through Chicago. But the network extends to other cities: Atlantic City, Las Vegas, Miami. Could be hundreds of children total. Jesus, Michael whispered. The people running this operation have connections everywhere. City Hall, state government, federal courts. They've been protected for years by people in positions of power. Sarah thought about the names in James Jordan's notebooks. The politicians and businessmen he wrote about. They were customers? Some were customers. Others were just being paid to look the other way. Your father started figuring out who was who. Agent Gonzalez showed them a copy of one of James Jordan's notebook pages. This one was different from what Sarah had seen before. Instead of gambling records, it contained names, dates, and notes about conversations. Look at this entry from July 15, 1993. Agent Gonzalez pointed. Your father wrote, Vincent angry about newspaper investigation. Says reporter, asking questions about missing kids from Humboldt Park. There was a newspaper investigation? Sarah asked. A young reporter for the Sun-Times was looking into missing children from low-income neighborhoods. Kids who disappeared and were never found. She was getting close to connecting the disappearances to the gambling operations. What happened to her? Car accident. Brake failure on the Kennedy Expressway. She died 3 days before your father was killed. The room went silent. Sarah realized how close she'd come to suffering the same fate. How many other people have they killed? Michael asked. We know of at least 6 deaths over the past 5 years, all people who got too close to the truth. All made to look like accidents or random crimes. Agent Gonzalez pulled out another document. But here's what gives me hope. Your father's notebooks contain information we've never been able to get from any other source. Names, dates, financial records, and now, with the live television coverage from tonight, the whole city knows something big is happening. What do you mean? Sarah asked. I mean that Channel 7's coverage of the parking lot confrontation has been picked up by national news. CNN is running the story. The FBI can't pretend this investigation doesn't exist anymore. Michael leaned forward. You're saying we've forced this into the open? Exactly. For years, this has been a quiet investigation that powerful people could control and suppress. But now it's public. Now there's pressure to get results. Sarah felt a mix of hope and fear, which makes us more valuable as witnesses, but also bigger targets. True, but it also means we can move fast. Tonight's confrontation spooked them. They're making mistakes, taking risks they normally wouldn't take. Agent Gonzalez's phone buzzed. She looked at it and smiled. Speaking of mistakes, she said, Chicago PD just arrested Vincent Torino. He was trying to leave the city with a suitcase full of cash and fake identification. "Will he talk?" Michael asked. "He's already talking. Turns out Vinny doesn't want to go to prison for child trafficking. He's offering to give us names in exchange for a plea deal." Sarah's mind was racing. If Vinny talks, how many people could he identify? Dozens. Politicians, judges, businessmen, law enforcement officers. This could bring down half the corrupt officials in Chicago. Michael stood up and walked to the whiteboard on the wall. "So what's our next move?" "We need you both to go into protective custody while we make arrests. It's going to be dangerous for the next few days." "No," Michael said firmly. "Michael, these people have killed at least 6. I said no. I have Game 2 of the finals tomorrow night. 21,000 people have tickets. The whole city is watching. I'm not hiding." Agent Gonzalez looked frustrated. "Michael, be reasonable. Your life is in danger. My life has been in danger for 5 years, but I'm not going to let these people control me anymore. Besides, what safer place is there than the United Center with 20,000 witnesses and national television coverage?" Sarah understood his reasoning. He's right. They can't do anything to him during a basketball game. Too public, too many cameras. And after the game? "After the game, we keep investigating," Michael said. "We find every person involved in this trafficking ring. We make sure they all go to prison. And we save those kids." Agent Gonzalez sighed. "If you insist on playing basketball while there's a contract out on your life, then we're going to have to do this the hard way." "What's the hard way?" "We turn you into bait. Let them come after you. But this time, we'll be ready." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "You want to use Michael as bait?" "I want to end this trafficking ring before more children get hurt. And if that means putting Michael at risk, then yes." Michael nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" "Play your game tomorrow night. Act normal, but wear a wire, and let us position agents throughout the arena. When they make their move, we'll be ready. And if something goes wrong, then we hope you're as good at dodging bullets as you are at dodging defenders." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was the only plan they had. Sarah spent the rest of the night in a safe house FBI facility, but she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she thought about the children who were being trafficked, about James Jordan trying to save them, about the reporter who died investigating their disappearances. At 6 a.m., her phone rang. It was her mother. "Sarah, we saw you on the news. Are you okay? What's happening?" Sarah had forgotten that the parking lot confrontation had been broadcast live. Her parents must be terrified. "I'm okay, Mom. I'm working on a big story. A really important story." "Important enough to get yourself killed?" Sarah thought about the children, about the trafficking ring, about all the people who'd been murdered to keep this secret. "Yes, Mom, important enough." When she hung up, Sarah realized that she'd crossed a line. She wasn't just a reporter anymore. She was someone who would risk everything to expose the truth and save innocent lives. Game 2 was 12 hours away. In 12 hours, they would either catch the people responsible for James Jordan's death and the trafficking of dozens of children, or they would die trying. Either way, Sarah knew that her life would never be the same. Game 2 of the NBA Finals felt different from the moment Sarah walked into the United Center. FBI agents dressed as security guards were positioned throughout the arena. Agent Gonzalez sat in the media section, pretending to be a sports reporter. Even the hot dog vendors had been replaced by undercover federal agents. Michael warmed up, on the court like it was any other game, but Sarah could see the small wire taped to his chest under his jersey. If the traffickers made their move tonight, every word would be recorded. "This is insane," Sarah muttered to herself as she took her seat in the press box. She was supposed to cover the game like a normal reporter, but her hands shook every time she tried to type. The Bulls were playing the Utah Jazz, but Sarah's eyes kept scanning the crowd for faces that didn't belong. Anthony Cascio was still somewhere in Chicago, along with his team of armed men. They knew Michael had evidence that could destroy their operation. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Chicago Bulls." The announcer's voice boomed through the arena as 21,000 fans erupted in cheers. Michael jogged onto the court with his teammates, waving to the crowd. He looked calm, confident, like he always did before big games. But Sarah knew better. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes moved constantly, looking for threats. The game started at 8 p.m. For the first quarter, everything seemed normal. Michael scored 12 points, the Bulls took an early lead, and the crowd was electric with excitement. Sarah almost let herself believe that maybe the traffickers wouldn't try anything during such a public event. Then, during the first time out, Agent Gonzalez's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece. "We have movement. 3 men in Section 108, row 15. They're not watching the game." Sarah looked toward Section 108. 3 men in expensive suits were sitting together, but their eyes weren't on the basketball court. They were watching Michael. ".E2. We recognize them?" Sarah whispered into her microphone. "Negative, but they match the description of Casio's associates from last night." The second quarter began. Michael continued playing brilliantly, but Sarah noticed he was staying closer to his teammates than usual. He wasn't taking his normal isolation plays, wasn't driving to the basket alone. At halftime, with the Bulls leading 52-48, Michael disappeared into the tunnel with his team. That's when Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet us in Tunnel B or the children die tonight." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She showed the message to Agent Gonzalez, who immediately started speaking into her radio. "Chalu, units, we have a credible threat. Suspect is using children as leverage. Michael, do you copy?" Michael's voice came through the earpiece, slightly out of breath from playing. "I copy. What do you need me to do?" "They want to meet in Tunnel B. It's obviously a trap. But if they really have children..." Sarah understood Michael's dilemma. If the traffickers were holding kids hostage, they couldn't ignore the threat. "Agent Gonzalez," Sarah said, "what if we give them what they want, but on our terms?" "What do you mean?" Michael goes to Tunnel B, but with backup. Hidden cameras, agents in position. We catch them in the act of threatening him. Too risky. Everything we've done has been risky. But we're running out of time. If they're planning to move those children tonight... Agent Gonzalez was quiet for a moment. "Michael, it's your call." Michael's voice was steady. "I'm going to Tunnel B, but I want agents, close enough to help if things go wrong." "Understood. Give us 5 minutes to get into position." The third quarter started without Michael on the court. The Bulls coach told the crowd that Jordan was dealing with a minor injury and would return soon. But Sarah knew he was walking into the most dangerous situation of his life. Tunnel B was a service corridor that connected the player areas to the loading docks. Sarah watched on a hidden camera feed as Michael walked through the tunnel alone, his wire transmitting every sound. 3 figures emerged from the shadows. Anthony Cascio stepped forward, flanked by 2 men Sarah recognized from the parking lot confrontation. "Mr. Jordan, thank you for coming. Where are the children?" Michael's voice was cold. "Safe. For now. But that depends on what happens in the next few minutes." "What do you want?" "Your father's notebooks. All of them. and your promise to stop cooperating with the FBI. And if I refuse? Cassio pulled out his phone and showed Michael something on the screen. Sarah couldn't see what it was, but Michael's reaction told her everything she needed to know. Jesus Christ, Michael whispered. 6 children, ages 8 to 14, all taken from Chicago neighborhoods in the past month, all waiting in a warehouse, 20 minutes from here. You're monsters. We're businessmen, and you're threatening our business. Michael was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, harder. You know what? You're right. I am threatening your business, and I'm going to destroy it completely. I don't think you understand the situation. No, I don't think you understand the situation. You see, every word you've said in the past, 5 minutes has been recorded by the FBI. And right now, federal agents are tracking the location signal from your phone to find that warehouse. Cassio's expression changed instantly. You're bluffing. Agent Gonzalez, are you listening? Agent Gonzalez's voice came through Michael's wire, loud enough for everyone to hear. We hear everything, Mr. Cassio, and we've just identified the warehouse location from your phone's GPS signal. FBI tactical teams are en route. Cassio reached for his gun, but before he could draw it, FBI agents poured into the tunnel from both directions. The 2 men with Cassio were on the ground in handcuffs. Within seconds, Anthony Cassio, you're under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy, and murder, Agent Gonzalez said as she approached with her weapon drawn. But Cassio wasn't finished. As the agents moved to arrest him, he pulled out a small device that looked like a garage door opener. You think this ends here? He snarled. You think arresting me saves those kids? This is bigger than Chicago, bigger than you can imagine. What's that device? Agent Gonzalez asked. Insurance. 1 button destroys all the evidence. Computer files, financial records, everything you need to prosecute the others involved. Put it down. I don't think so. You want to save those kids? You want to catch the politicians and judges who've been protecting us? Then you let me walk out of here. Sarah watched the standoff through the camera feed. 6 children were being held hostage in a warehouse. Evidence that could convict dozens of corrupt officials could be destroyed with the push of a button. And Anthony Cassio was the only person who could save both. That's when Michael did something that shocked everyone. He stepped forward, putting himself between Cassio and the FBI agents. You want insurance? Michael said. Here's your insurance. I'll go with you. Me for the kids. 1 for 6. Michael, no! Agent Gonzalez shouted. Let me finish. I'll go with you, but only if you release the children first. And only if you give the FBI that device. Cassio laughed. You think I'm stupid? I think you're smart enough to know that kidnapping Michael Jordan will bring down more heat than your organization can handle. But letting him help you escape might actually work. Sarah realized what Michael was doing. He was buying time, keeping Cassio talking while FBI agents moved into position at the warehouse. You have 10 seconds to decide, Michael continued. Take me hostage and become the most wanted man in America, or let me help you disappear quietly. Cassio looked around the tunnel. FBI agents had him surrounded, but he still had the device that could destroy years of evidence. 5 seconds, Michael said. That's when Sarah heard Agent Gonzalez's voice in her earpiece. Warehouse secured. All 6 children safe. Repeat, all children are safe. Michael must have heard the same message through his wire because his entire demeanor changed. Actually, Michael said to Cassio, I changed my mind. I'm not going anywhere with you. Before Cassio could react, Michael tackled him. The device flew out of his hands and skittered across the tunnel floor. Agent Gonzalez grabbed it, while 2 other agents subdued Casio. "It's over," Agent Gonzalez said into her radio. "Suspect in custody. Evidence secured. Children safe." Sarah slumped in her chair, overwhelmed with relief. They'd done it. They'd caught the people responsible for James Jordan's death and saved 6 children from a trafficking ring. But even as FBI agents led Casio away in handcuffs, Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The device he'd been carrying contained evidence that would implicate dozens of other people. Politicians, judges, businessmen, all the corrupt officials who'd been protecting the trafficking operation. Michael returned to the basketball court for the 4th quarter. The crowd had no idea what had just happened in Tunnel B. To them, their hero had simply returned from treating an injury. He scored 15 points in the final 12 minutes, leading the Bulls to a 97-85 victory. As the final buzzer sounded and confetti fell from the ceiling, Sarah watched Michael collapse to his knees at center court. But this time, he wasn't crying from exhaustion or joy. He was crying because, after 5 years, he finally had justice for his father's death. In the locker room after the game, Sarah found Michael sitting alone, still in his uniform. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Like I can finally breathe again. Like my father can finally rest in peace." "What happens now?" Michael looked at her with eyes that seemed older than they had a week ago. "Now we make sure this never happens again. Now we use our voices to protect other children. Now we turn this nightmare into something that actually helps people." Sarah realized that their investigation had changed both of them forever. They'd started as enemies, a reporter trying to destroy a basketball star's reputation. They'd become partners in exposing one of the most evil conspiracies either of them had ever imagined. "Michael, there's something I need to ask you." "What?" "Your father's phone call, the night before he died. You said he told you he had information that could hurt important people. Did he ever tell you he was going to the FBI?" Michael was quiet for a long moment. "Actually, Sarah, he did tell me something else. Something I haven't told anyone, not even Agent Gonzalez." "What?" Michael looked directly at her. "He said he thought someone in the FBI might be involved. Someone who'd been tipping off the traffickers about investigations." Sarah's heart stopped. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying we may have just solved one conspiracy, but there might be another one, a bigger one." As Sarah processed this new information, she realized that their investigation was far from over. If there were corrupt FBI agents protecting child traffickers, then the conspiracy went even deeper than they'd imagined. But for tonight, 6 children were safe. Anthony Casio was in custody. And James Jordan's murder had finally been solved. It was a start. 6 months after the arrests at the United Center, Sarah sat in the Chicago Tribune newsroom, staring at her computer screen. The cursor blinked on a blank document titled The Jordan Files, Part 7. She was writing a series about the investigation, but today's article was the hardest one yet. Her editor, Frank Morrison, walked over with a cup of coffee and a proud smile. Ever since Sarah's investigation had exposed the trafficking ring, she'd become the Tribune's star reporter. The paper had won 3 journalism awards, and Sarah had received job offers from newspapers across the country. "How's the follow-up piece coming?" Frank asked, slowly. "It's hard to write about the corruption trial when new evidence keeps coming out every day." The trials had been going on for 4 months. Anthony Casio had pled guilty and was cooperating with federal prosecutors. His testimony had led to the arrests of 37 people, including 2 city councilmen, a federal judge, and a state senator. But as Michael had suspected, the corruption went deeper than anyone had imagined. "Any word on the FBI investigation?" Frank asked. Sarah nodded grimly. 3 agents have been arrested so far, including one who was feeding information to the traffickers for 2 years. The revelation that FBI agents had been protecting the ABV trafficking ring had shocked the entire law enforcement community. Agent Rita Gonzalez was leading an internal investigation, but Sarah knew it would take years to root out all the corruption. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. "Foundation meeting at 3 p.m. Can you make it?" She typed back, "I'll be there." The James R. Jordan Boys and Girls Club had opened 3 months ago in the South Side neighborhood where Marcus Williams lived. It was a beautiful facility with basketball courts, computer labs, tutoring rooms, and counseling services for kids who'd experienced trauma. Sarah drove to the club, thinking about how much her life had changed since that first phone call from Vincent Torino. She'd gone from covering high school basketball games to exposing one of the biggest corruption scandals in Chicago history. More importantly, she'd helped save 47 children. The investigation had uncovered trafficking operations in 6 states. Children who'd been missing for months or years were found and reunited with their families. Some, like the 6 kids rescued from the warehouse, were still recovering from their experiences. Michael was waiting for her in the conference room at the boys' club. He looked older than he had during the basketball season, but more peaceful. The weight he'd carried for 5 years was finally gone. "How are the kids doing?" Sarah asked, settling into a chair across from him. "Better. Dr. Martinez says trauma recovery takes time, but they're making progress. The youngest one, Tommy, just started sleeping through the night without nightmares." Sarah smiled. Tommy was 8 years old, the same age Michael had been when his father first taught him to play basketball. The connection wasn't lost on either of them. "What about the older kids?" "Maria starts high school in the fall. She wants to be a social worker when she grows up, to help other kids who've been through what she experienced." Michael's voice was proud. "They're all fighters, survivors." Sarah opened her notebook. "I'm working on a follow-up story about the foundation. Can you tell me about the expansion plans?" "We're opening 3 more clubs next year. One in Detroit, one in Atlanta, one in Los Angeles. All in neighborhoods where kids are most at risk." Michael had donated $10 million of his own money to start the foundation. Corporate sponsors and individual donors had contributed millions more. The goal was to create safe spaces where children could get help, education, and protection. "But it's not just about the clubs," Michael continued. "We're also working with law enforcement to train officers to recognize signs of trafficking. And we're funding research into how criminal networks recruit and move children." Sarah took notes, but she was also thinking about the personal cost of their investigation. Michael had retired from basketball after leading the Bulls to their 6th championship. At 35, he was still playing at an elite level, but he'd decided to dedicate his life to protecting children. "Do you ever regret giving up basketball?" Sarah asked. Michael was quiet for a moment. "Basketball gave me everything: fame, money, the ability to help people. But this work, this is what my father would have wanted me to do. You think he'd be proud?" "I know he would. Dad always said that talent is a gift, but what you do with it is a choice. I'm finally making the right choice." Sarah's phone rang. She looked at the caller ID and frowned. It was Agent Gonzalez. "I should take this," Sarah said, stepping into the hallway. "Sarah, we need to meet. Tonight. There's been a development in the FBI corruption investigation." "What kind of development?" "The kind that makes everything we thought we knew about this case look small. Can you meet me at the Federal Building at 7 p.m.? "I'll be there." Sarah returned to the conference room where Michael was reviewing architectural plans for the Detroit Club. That was Agent Gonzalez. She wants to meet tonight about the FBI investigation. Michael looked up from the plans. Good news or bad news? With this case, I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. That evening, Sarah and Michael met Agent Gonzalez in the same secure conference room where they'd first learned about the trafficking operation. But this time, Agent Gonzalez looked tired and worried. What we've discovered in the past week changes everything, she began. The corruption in the FBI wasn't just about protecting a trafficking ring, it was about protecting a much larger criminal network. She opened a new file folder, thick with documents and photographs. The traffickers were just one part of a broader conspiracy. Money laundering, arms dealing, drug trafficking, political corruption, all connected to the same network of people. Sarah felt a familiar chill. How big are we talking? International. We've found connections to criminal organizations in 12 countries. The poker games in Chicago were just one small piece of a global operation. Michael leaned forward. Are you saying my father stumbled onto something even bigger than we realized? Your father documented the American operations of one of the largest criminal networks in the world. If he'd lived to testify, he could have brought down hundreds of people across multiple countries. Agent Gonzalez showed them a map covered with red pins. Each pin represented a location where the network operated. Cities across the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Europe. The good news is that your investigation gave us the breakthrough we needed. Cassio's device contained financial records that allowed us to trace money flows across borders. We've made arrests in 8 countries so far. And the bad news? Sarah asked. The bad news is that we've only scratched the surface. There are still powerful people involved who haven't been caught. And some of them know that you two are responsible for exposing their operation. Michael and Sarah exchanged glances. They'd thought the danger was over after Cassio's arrest. Are we still in danger? Sarah asked. We think so, which is why we're offering you both witness protection. Michael shook his head immediately. I'm not hiding. I have a foundation to run. Kids who depend on me. Michael, be reasonable. I was reasonable for 5 years, and it got us nowhere. Sometimes you have to stand and fight. Sarah understood his position, but she also understood the reality of their situation. Agent Gonzalez, what if we compromise? What if we agree to extra security but continue our work? What do you mean? I mean federal protection while we keep investigating. Keep writing stories. Keep exposing corruption, but with backup. Agent Gonzalez considered this. It's risky, but it might work. The more public attention this story gets, the harder it becomes for them to silence you. Michael nodded. Then, that's what we do. We keep fighting, but we fight smart. Over the next hour, they planned a strategy that would allow Sarah to continue her reporting, while Michael expanded his foundation work. Federal agents would provide security, but Sarah and Michael would remain visible, continuing to pressure corrupt officials and protect vulnerable children. There's one more thing, Agent Gonzalez said, as they prepared to leave. We've identified the person who was feeding information to the traffickers from within the FBI. Who? Assistant Director William Crawford. He's been in charge of organized crime investigations for the past 8 years. He knew about every major investigation, every witness, every piece of evidence. Sarah felt sick. Crawford had been in a position to protect criminal networks from federal investigation for nearly a decade. How many people died because of his corruption? Michael asked. We're still investigating, but it's at least 15 people over the past 5 years. Witnesses, investigators, journalists, all killed because Crawford warned the criminals they were in danger. Michael's hands clenched into fists. My father could have been saved. If Crawford hadn't been protecting the network, yes, your father's information would have led to arrests before he was killed. Sarah put her hand on Michael's arm. She could see the anger and grief in his eyes. Michael, we can't change what happened to your father, but we can make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. When they left the federal building, Sarah and Michael walked to their cars in silence. The weight of what they'd learned was overwhelming. James Jordan's death was connected to a criminal network that spanned the globe. Dozens of people had died to protect secrets that reached into the highest levels of government and law enforcement. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked. Michael looked up at the Chicago skyline, the same view his father would have seen driving through the city. "Now we honor his memory by finishing what he started. We expose every corrupt official, save every child we can, and make sure the truth comes out. Even if it takes the rest of our lives, especially if it takes the rest of our lives." As they drove through the city where it all began, Sarah realized that their investigation had become something bigger than either of them had imagined. They weren't just seeking justice for one man's death anymore. They were fighting to protect children, expose corruption, and prove that the truth was more powerful than any criminal conspiracy. 6 months ago, Sarah had been a struggling reporter looking for her big break. Now she was part of a global effort to dismantle one of the largest criminal networks in history. It wasn't the career she'd planned, but it was the career that mattered most. The work was dangerous, the enemy was powerful, and the fight would never truly end. But for the first time in her life, Sarah knew she was exactly where she belonged. 1 year after Anthony Cassio's arrest, Sarah Chen sat in her new office at the Chicago Tribune. The walls were covered with awards, photos from her investigation, and a large map showing the locations of James R. Jordan boys and girls clubs across the country. Her desk held stacks of letters from children and families whose lives had been changed by her reporting. But today, Sarah was focused on a single document that had arrived by courier that morning. The return address was from the Federal Correctional Institution in Terre Haute, Indiana. The sender was Anthony Cassio. Sarah had been expecting this letter for months. Cassio had been cooperating with federal prosecutors, but he'd also been hinting that he had one final secret, something he'd been saving until all the other trials were finished. Now, with Assistant Director Crawford convicted and sentenced to life in prison, and the last of the corrupt officials behind bars, Cassio was finally ready to reveal his biggest secret. Sarah opened the letter with hands that trembled slightly. "Miss Chen, you think you know the whole story. You think you've solved every mystery and caught every criminal. But there's one more thing you need to know. One more truth that will change everything you believe about this case. Your investigation saved 47 children from our trafficking network. But there was one more child, one whose rescue meant more to Michael Jordan than you could possibly understand. Meet me at the prison this Saturday at 2 p.m. Come alone. What I have to tell you will explain why Michael Jordan really retired from basketball and why his father's death was even more personal than you realized." Anthony Cassio Sarah read the letter 3 times, her mind racing. What could Cassio possibly know that would change their understanding of the case? They'd uncovered the trafficking ring, exposed the corruption, saved dozens of children. What was left? She picked up her phone and called Michael. "Sarah, good to hear from you. How's the new book coming?" Sarah was writing a book about their investigation, with all proceeds going to the foundation. "It's going well. But Michael, I need to ask you something. Has Cassio ever tried to contact you?" There was a pause. "Why?" "I got a letter from him today. He claims there's something we don't know about the case, something about one more child who was rescued." Another pause. longer this time. Michael? Are you there? Yeah, I'm here. Sarah, there's something I haven't told you. Something I haven't told anyone. Sarah felt her reporter instincts kicking in. What? Can you meet me at the foundation? We need to talk in person. 20 minutes later, Sarah sat across from Michael in his office at the original boys' club. Through the window, she could see children playing basketball on the outdoor courts. Their laughter echoed through the building, a sound that would have been impossible a year ago. You remember what I told you about my father's final phone call? Michael asked. He said he had information that could hurt important people. That's true, but he also told me something else. Something about a child who'd been taken from our neighborhood. A child he was trying to help. Sarah leaned forward. What child? Michael walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder she'd never seen before. Inside were documents, photos, and what looked like private investigator reports. Her name was Jessica Chen. She was 12 years old when she disappeared from Chinatown in 1992. Sarah's heart stopped. Chen was her last name, but there were thousands of Chens in Chicago. It had to be a coincidence. Sarah, Jessica Chen disappeared from the same block where your parents' restaurant is located. The room started spinning. Sarah gripped the arms of her chair. Show me the photo, she whispered. Michael handed her a missing person flyer from 1992. The photo showed a young Asian girl with long black hair and a bright smile. She was wearing a red dress and holding a basketball. Sarah stared at the photo. The girl looked familiar, but she couldn't place where she'd seen that face before. Sarah, when's your birthday? Michael asked gently. March 15th, 1970. And Jessica. Chen's birthday was March 15th, 1980. She would be 28 years old now, the same age as you. Sarah's mind refused to process what Michael was suggesting. That's impossible. I'm Sarah Chen. I've always been Sarah Chen. My parents owned the restaurant my whole life. Michael pulled out another document. This is Jessica Chen's birth certificate. Her parents were David and Linda Chen. They owned Chen's Garden Restaurant on Wentworth Avenue. Sarah felt like she was drowning. My parents are David and Linda Chen. They own Chen's Garden Restaurant. Sarah, I think Jessica Chen is your sister, your younger sister who was kidnapped when you were 22 years old. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She remembered being 22, remembered living in Chicago during her final year of college, but she had no memory of a younger sister. That's impossible. I would remember having a sister. Michael sat down next to her. Unless you were made to forget. What do you mean? The trafficking network didn't just take children. They also eliminated traces of their existence, threatened families into silence, destroyed records, made it seem like the children had never existed. Sarah thought about her parents, about their quiet sadness that she'd always attributed to the stress of running a restaurant, about the locked room upstairs in their house that they'd never explained, about the way they sometimes looked at her with an expression she couldn't understand. If I had a sister, why wouldn't my parents tell me? Because they were threatened. Because they were told that if they ever spoke about Jessica, their other daughter might disappear too. Michael showed her more documents. Financial records showing payments from David and Linda Chen to various people over the years. Payments that looked suspiciously like extortion. Your parents have been paying money to keep you safe, Sarah. For over 20 years, they've been buying your safety with their silence about Jessica. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed her mother's number. Answer it, Michael said gently. Mom? Sarah's voice was shaky. Sarah? Where are you? You sound upset. Mom, I need to ask you something. Did I ever have a sister? The line went completely quiet. Sarah could hear her mother breathing, but no words came. Mom? Sarah, come home. Come home right now. Your father and I need to talk to you. The drive to her parents' restaurant felt like the longest 20 minutes of Sarah's life. Michael came with her, understanding that she needed support for whatever they were about to discover. Chen's garden looked exactly the same as it had when Sarah was a child. Red lanterns hung from the ceiling, the smell of garlic and ginger filled the air, and her parents stood behind the counter looking older and more tired than she'd ever seen them. Mom, Dad, this is Michael Jordan. Her parents bowed respectfully, but their eyes were filled with fear. Sarah, her father said quietly, we need to go upstairs. They climbed the narrow stairs to the apartment above the restaurant. Her parents led her to the locked room she'd always wondered about. Her father pulled out a key and opened the door. Inside was a child's bedroom, perfectly preserved. Pink walls, stuffed animals, a desk with homework assignments dated 1992. On the wall were dozens of photos of two girls, one who looked exactly like Sarah at age 22, and one who was the girl from the missing person flyer. Sarah, her mother said, tears streaming down her face. This was your sister Jessica's room. Sarah stared at the photos. Slowly, memories began to surface. Fragments of scenes she'd somehow forgotten. Playing basketball with a younger girl, teaching someone to ride a bike, helping with homework at the restaurant. Why can't I remember her clearly? Her father sat down heavily on Jessica's bed. Because we made you forget. We paid for therapy to help you block the memories. We thought it would protect you. Protect me from what? From the people who took her. They told us that if we ever spoke about Jessica, if we ever tried to find her, they would take you too. Sarah's mother pulled out a shoebox filled with letters. But we never stopped looking. We hired private investigators, paid informants, followed every lead. We spent every penny we had trying to find her. Michael stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I think we found her. Sarah's parents looked at him with hope and terror. The trafficking network we exposed kept detailed records. Children they'd taken, families they'd threatened, money they'd collected. Jessica's name is in those records. Is she alive? Sarah's mother whispered. Yes, she's alive. And she's been looking for you, too. Michael explained how the investigation had uncovered Jessica's trail. She'd been held by the trafficking network for 3 years before managing to escape in 1995. She'd been living under a different name, working with social services to help other rescued children. She's been working at a children's shelter in Detroit, using the name Jennifer Walsh. She's 28 years old now, married, with a daughter of her own. Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard on Jessica's childhood bed, surrounded by memories that were slowly returning. She knows about me? She's been trying to find you for years, but the therapy you received, the memory blocks, it made you essentially invisible to her searches. She was looking for Sarah Chen, who remembered having a sister, not Sarah Chen, who'd forgotten. Her mother was sobbing now. We thought we were protecting you. We thought if you forgot about Jessica, you'd be safe. But instead, you took away my memories of my own sister. Sarah's father nodded miserably. We made a terrible choice. We were so scared of losing you, too. Michael pulled out his phone. Would you like to call her? Sarah looked around Jessica's room, at the photos of two sisters who'd been separated by criminals and fear. at parents who'd sacrificed everything to protect one daughter while never stopping their search for the other. "Yes," Sarah said. "I want to call my sister." 20 minutes later, Sarah heard Jessica's voice for the first time in over 20 years. "Sarah? Is it really you?" "Jessica, I'm so sorry I forgot about you. I'm so sorry I didn't keep looking. You were made to forget. It wasn't your choice. But Sarah, I never forgot about you. Not for one day." They talked for 2 hours. Jessica told Sarah about her escape, her years in foster care, her work helping other trafficking survivors. Sarah told Jessica about their parents, about the investigation, about how the criminals who'd taken her were finally in prison. "I have a daughter," Jessica said. "Her name is Sarah. I named her after you." When the call ended, Sarah sat in her sister's childhood room with her parents and Michael, trying to process everything she'd learned. "The trafficking network took Jessica to hurt our family," her father explained. "But they also used her disappearance to control us. Every year, they'd send a photo proving she was alive, along with demands for money and silence." "That's why you've been struggling financially," Sarah realized. "You've been paying them for 20 years. We would have paid for 100 years if it meant keeping you safe." Michael stood up. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen, those payments are over. The people who threatened your family are in prison. And tomorrow, if Sarah agrees, we're going to bring Jessica home." Sarah looked at the photos on the wall. 2 sisters separated by crime and fear, but never really apart. Her investigation into Michael Jordan's gambling had led her to uncover a trafficking network. That investigation had saved 47 children, but the most important child they'd saved was one she'd never known they were looking for: her own sister. "Michael," Sarah said, "do you think this is why I was chosen to investigate your story? Do you think someone knew that following your father's murder would lead me to Jessica?" Michael smiled. "I think your father, both your fathers, were watching over us. I think they made sure the right reporter got the right story at the right time." Sarah picked up one of the photos from Jessica's desk. It showed 2 sisters playing basketball in the alley behind the restaurant. In the photo, the older sister was teaching the younger one how to shoot. "You know what the most stunning thing is?" Sarah said. "What?" "They tried to destroy our family with lies and threats and violence. They tried to make us forget each other, make us afraid, make us weak." Sarah stood up, holding the photo of her and Jessica. "But the truth brought us back together. Love brought us back together. And tomorrow, for the first time in 20 years, my sister is coming home." Michael Jordan had confronted a reporter who tried to cancel him with lies about gambling. But the real story was much more stunning than anyone could have imagined. The story wasn't about a basketball player's gambling addiction. It was about 2 sisters separated by evil but reunited by truth. It was about parents who sacrificed everything to protect their children. It was about a father who died trying to save other people's kids. Most of all, it was about the power of truth to heal even the deepest wounds and bring families back together. Sarah Chen had started this investigation looking for a career-making story. She'd found something much more valuable. She'd found her sister. She'd found her purpose. And she'd learned that sometimes the most important stories are the ones that save the people you love most. We'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and tell us your city or country. It's amazing to connect with viewers from all around the world. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that will inspire, shock, and remind you of the power of truth and love. We share amazing tales every week that you won't want to miss. And don't keep this story to yourself. Share it with your friends and family. Stories like this remind us that truth always wins, love conquers fear, and sometimes the most important discoveries come from the most unexpected places. By sharing, you're helping spread kindness and awareness about the real issues that matter. Thank you for listening. And remember, the most stunning revelations often come from the courage to ask the right questions and never give up on finding the truth. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love and family.